Hello, I am now going to record Shabbos Daf Memtes. We're up to Iboiluhu, 3 lines from the top, Memtes Amid Aleph. Before we begin, Hadran Alach, I want to go back to a Gemara from yesterday that we had difficulty with, and I'll take my time. Rabban and Reb Zera visited the Resh Galusa, and they saw that the Resh Galusa's slave had put a jug of cold water on top of a kettle of hot water, and Rabbi yelled at him. Reb Zera said, "Why are you yelling? Why is that different than putting a pot of hot water on top of a pot of hot water?" Rabbi told him, because a pot of hot water on top of a pot of hot water, the top pot is already hot. But here you're putting a jug of cold water on top of hot, and it's cold. And you're going to make it hot. Or you're going to make it warm. So, yesterday I said that the simpler pshat in the Gemara was taisvus. That if you have a pot of hot water, which is boiling, and you put it on top of another pot of hot water, so what could the problem be? It can't be bishul, you can't be mavashal water that's boiling, so it's perfectly okay. On the other hand, if you have a jug of cold water that you put on top of a pot of hot water, even though the slave's intent was only to make the cold water lukewarm, but we're afraid, Rabbi was afraid, if he leaves it there, the cold water will boil. Simple enough. The only problem with this pshat, which is so simple, is that then it's an inyan of bishul. There's no bishul of a pot of hot water on top of a pot of hot water, but there could be possibly a fear of bishul if you put a pot of cold water on top of a pot of hot water. But then the Rabbeinu Yoina asks on Taisvus, why is it in Perek B'met Taimnin? If it has to do with bishul, not with hatmana. So Rashi's pshat was that when you put one on top of the other, even though you're not enveloping it totally, that's also called atmana, as long as it's touching the lower pot. So here we started to struggle. If the lower pot is on the fire, then it's meisiv hevel. Then you couldn't put a pot on top of a pot on Shabbos because it's atmana b'davar meisiv hevel. You can't even put it on erev Shabbos. If the bottom one is meisiv hevel, you can't even put it on erev Shabbos. You can't do atmana b'davar meisiv hevel erev Shabbos. So first of all, let the pot be off the fire. If the pot is off the fire, so the explanation in Rashi was that since the pot is off the fire and the heat of the pot is decreasing, therefore the pot is not called meisiv hevel, and therefore it's only mekayim hevel. But the problem was still major. Even if it's only mekayim hevel, how on Shabbos can you put a pot of hot water on top of another pot of hot water when the bottom one is just mekayim hevel? If you're going to call that hatmana, you're not allowed to be matman on Shabbos even as something which is mekayim hevel. There was a problem. So I called a young man, Reb Zelig Waldman, Talmud Chochem here in the city, and I told him my problem. So he told me that based on the Mishnah Berurah, Pshat in the Gemara is, and again it's a chiddush nifla, that the Gemara is talking where the bottom pot is enveloped in a towel, which means that the bottom pot already had its own hatmana. And therefore, when you put a pot of hot water on top of the pot of hot water at the bottom, even though you're putting it on top of something which is mekayim hevel, it's going to maintain the heat of the top pot. But since the bottom one already was mutman, so therefore putting the pot on top is only adding to the hatmana, adding hatmana to hatmana, and adding hatmana to hatmana is mutter, even on Shabbos, even if it's mekayim hevel. So although ordinarily I could not put the top pot on top of the bottom one if it's mekayim hevel, but if the bottom one already had a towel around it and it was already mutman, then putting the top one on top of it is only adding to something that already had atmana, and that's okay. All right, I mean, I didn't look up the Mishnah Berurah. I still need to do that. It's just a pela. Where does it say this in the Gemara? Where did Rashi get this from? Or where did somebody see that Rashi saw in the Gemara that the bottom pot was surrounded with a towel? Wait, I'm not finished. Assuming that that's true, it's considered just meisif ala hatmana. So then what was the problem? Why was Rabbi shouting at the Eved who put a jug of cold water on the bottom pot of hot water, if it's just Moisef ala Hatmana. So that's already a Bir Halacha in a different simon, he said, where although in principle the kasha is an excellent kasha, if it's not called Hatmana because it's Moisef ala Hatmana, what should the problem be? But since the top one is cold and the bottom one is hot, and the bottom one is going to make the top one hotter, although the bottom one is only Mekayim Hevel, right? It's only Mekayim Hevel. But since it's making the cold water hot, we're going to treat the bottom one as if it would be Moisef Hevel, because it's making the cold water hotter, and therefore this heter of adding ala hatmana is not going to work if the top one is cold. Why? Because since the cold one is getting warmer, or perhaps can even get hotter, right? So therefore, this idea that moisif al hatmana is okay is not good if the top one is cold, which is making it warmer, because then we're going to consider the bottom one, which really is mekayim hevel, as if it's considered a moisif hevel. Anyway, so that's that. So now let's continue a new piece of Gemara on top of Mem Tes Amud Aleph. We learned in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to do hatmana in straw or grape pulp or soft fiber or fabric or grasses when they're moist, because when they're moist, the Mishnah says that it's moisef hevel, but you can be matman in them when they're dry, because then it's only mekayim hevel, and then you can put them in on Erev Shabbos. Yiboilu, the Gemara wanted to know, when we say lach and moist, is it machmas atzman, is it its own moisture, or idil malach and machmas davar achar, or is moist called moist even if it got moist from an outside source? Toshima, come and listen to the Mishnah. Loi b'teven, you can't be matman in straw, v'lo bezogim, and not with stuff that comes from grapes, v'lo b'muchen, not from soft fibers or fabrics, v'lo b'asavim or grass, b'zman shem lachem, when they're moist. Iyam redishlem b'lachem achbaz davar achar, if moisture means from an outside source, shapir, I understand how these things may become moist from an outside source. Eliyam red lachem machmas atzman, if we're talking about natural moisture, muchen lachem machmas atzman hechim eshkachasla, how does soft fiber have natural moisture? And the Gemara answer is also an unusual teres. Mimirta de bene atmi. It's wool that was plucked from under the thighs of an animal where it's sweaty, and that natural moisture is still in there when you have soft fabric or soft fibers. It still has some of its original natural moisture. And Vadatani, but there's a brisa of Ishaya taught in the brisa, time in the ksus yivesha of a paris yiveshin. You're allowed to be matman in dry clothing and in dry grain and like barley or wheat, but not in peiros, in produce which is moist, nor in moist garments. So ksus lacha machmas atzma hechem eshkachas. How do you have garments that have natural moisture? The Gemara says bimirta de bene atmi. The garments were made from wool, and the wool had been shorn from under the thighs of the sheep, and therefore that garment still has some natural moisture. Okay. So we're not sure. We're not sure if moisture means natural moisture or outside moisture. Look to Mishnah, time in biksusa bepeiris, you're allowed to be matmen in garments or in produce like wheat or lentils. Those are only mekayim hevel, so you can be matmen me'erev Shabbos. The kanfa yaina with the feathers of a pigeon, b'nesayrish shel charoshem with sawdust, b'na'irish shel pishtan daka, small pieces that are combed out of when you comb flax. Rabbi Yehuda iser b'daka mater b'gaser. Rabbi Yehuda says if it's thin, then it's aser, but if it's bigger pieces, then it's muter. We'll see the Gemara what he's referring to. Rabbi Yana says tefillin tzrichin guf naki. Tefillin, you have to make sure your body is clean. Kalisha bal kanafayim, like Elisha bal kanafayim who had a clean body. Mahi, what is the story of Elisha? What does clean mean? Abayim arbayis shelo yafiach bem. A person should only put on tefillin when he's sure that he's not going to pass gas. And Rava says shelo yisham bem. A person should only put on tefillin when he's sure he won't sleep in them, because if he sleeps, either he might pass gas or he might be mitzi carry. So tefillin needs guf naki. Amai korele balkanafayim. Why was Elisha called balkanafayim? Shapam achas, one time Gazra Malchus Roimi Hershah Gzer al Yisrael. One time the Roman government made a decree. Shekol aminiach tefillin yinakru es moichay. Whoever wears tefillin, they're going to puncture his skull where you wear tefillin. V'haya Elisha menicham. Elisha put the tefillin on. V'yoytzel Ashuk, he was in the market. Ro kazdar echad. So this Roman official saw him. Rotz mipanav, and Elisha ran away. Rotz achrov, the Roman official chased him. Kivim shegi atzle, once the Roman official caught up to him, Netola miraisha, Elisha took the tefillin off his head, achzam biyad, and held it inside his hand. Amar Loi, the official told him, Mazeh biyadcha, what do you have in your hand? Amar Loi said, Kanfa yaina, I have the feathers of a pigeon. Pashat as yada, he opened his hand, and a naze happened. Nimtzu kanfa yaina, there were feathers of a pigeon in his hand. Lefichach kairin Loi Elisha bal kanafan. Therefore, he was called Elisha, the one with the feathers, with the feathers of a bird. Why did the miracle happen only with kanfa yaina? Mishum de imsil knesses Yisrael yaina, because Klal Yisrael is compared to a yaina, to a dove. Shenemar, as it says in Tilim, Perik Samaches, kanfa yaina nechpa bekesef. The wings of Klal Yisrael, the yaina, were covered with silver when they came out of Mitzrayim. And the comparison is ma yaina knafel maginais olah. Just like a yaina, its wings protect it from cold, and also it defends itself with its wings. Of Yisrael mitzvahs beginas aleim. Yisrael also, the mitzvahs protect the Jewish people the way the wings protect the yaina. This needs a lot of explanation. The first kasha is Taisus asks why Elisha took off his tefillin when b'shas hashmad you're supposed to be meiser nefesh. So some Rishonim answer that you're only supposed to be meiser nefesh not to violate a lois asay, but for a mitzvah asay you don't have to be meiser nefesh. The Ritva says you have to be meiser nefesh for tefillin, but you can be yotze the mitzvah of tefillin just by putting them on once a day. Elisha bal Kanafayim had them on when he already could have been yotze, so therefore it was extra. If it was extra, he doesn't have to be meiser nefesh for wearing the tefillin more time of the day, and therefore he was able to take them off. The question is, if there was a gzeira against, if he was, okay. Some say, if he was not chayiv to be meiser nefesh, because it's only a mitzvah saseh, and you don't have to be meiser nefesh for mitzvah saseh, so why did he put him on in the first place? So the Rishonim answer, the Rambam, the Ran answer, that even though you're not chayiv to be meiser nefesh for mitzvah saseh, but you have the option, if you want to, you can. So Elisha, bal Kanafayim, even though it's a mitzvah saseh, and some Rishonim say you don't have to be meiser nefesh for mitzvah saseh, but he took the option to be meiser nefesh. Okay. By the way, the assumption, says Taisus, is that if he had a nace that happened to him with his tefillin, mistuma, he was very careful to wear them begufnaki. So that's why there's no raya. But tefillin tzricha gufnaki k'Elisha bal Kanafayim. Tefillin needs a gufnaki, which I assume is the way Elisha bal Kanafayim wore his tefillin. There's another beautiful pshat though. So I had a kasha for years. The Gemara says that the same way that a yaina protects itself with its wings, Klal Yisrael protects itself with mitzvahs. So Klal Yisrael is compared to a yaina. Every creature has a way to protect itself. Like a lion protects itself with its claws, an octopus protects itself with its ink. So you could have compared Klal Yisrael to anything. The same way that anything protects itself with whatever it protects itself with, Klal Yisrael protects itself with mitzvahs. I once heard a beautiful pshat. I think I heard it from my brother-in-law, David Nalman. He said there's a medrash, which I never found, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he created a bird. So the bird had a complaint to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's a lion, it's strong, it's fast, a cheetah is fast, a bear is strong. Me, I'm tiny, I'm weak, and I have two spindly little feet, and I can't even run. So I'm going to be a korban, any creature can kill me. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, you know what, leave it to me. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him wings. But on the two sides gave him wings. So the bird looked at Kadosh Baruch Hu and said, I couldn't move my body with the two spindly legs that I had. Now you gave me two suitcases on my two sides to schlep. So Kadosh Baruch Hu said, fool, spread your wings, you'll see you can fly. Oh! So Kadosh Baruch Hu showed him that what he thought was really a burden really gave him the ability to fly and to escape, and even to use his wings to protect himself. Same thing, Klal Yisrael was Hama'at Mikol Ummah, it's a very small nation. So how are we going to survive? So Kosh Baruch gave us Tarek mitzvahs. So Klal Yisrael might have complained, it was hard enough to survive without the mitzvahs, now after Shlep 630 mitzvahs. So Hashem says, just like the bird, these are your wings, these are what gives you the ability to fly. This is what you protect yourself with. In the Mishnah we learned that you can be matmin in sawdust and into what you comb out from flax. Rabbi Yehuda answered in the thin and allowed in the bigger pieces. Yiboilu, the Gemara wants to know, Rabbi Yehuda nasar shel charoshin koi, and or shel pishtin koi. When Rabbi Yehuda says you can't use the thin, but you can only use the larger pieces, is he talking about sawdust, or is he talking what you comb out from flax? Toshima, very simple. The Tanya, the Brisa says, Rabbi Yehuda amar noira shel pishtin daka, whatever you comb out of flax, if it's thin little pieces, hareu kezevel, it's like manure, which is moisef hevel, and you can't be matman in it erev Shabbos. So Shema, you see, he's talking on noira shel pishtin koi. He's talking about what you come out of flax. Shema mina, the thin stuff is no good, but the bigger pieces is okay. So the Mishnah, time in bishlachin, you're allowed to be matman in hides. A hide of an animal is not going to be moisef hevel. Umetaltal and oisan, and hides are not muktzah on Shabbos because you can use them on Shabbos. You can sit down on them, use them as a mat. Also, you can be time in begizei tzemer with shearings of wool, but that vein metaltal and oisan, they're going to be muktzah because shearings of wool are a commercial object which you need to make it, spin it into thread, make fabric out of it. So ketzar oisa. So how do you insulate your pot with shearings of wool? If you've insulated it in the Erev Shabbos with the shearings of wool, what you do is you reach, if the pot has a top, the top of the pot you have something to hold on to, so you take the top of the pot off, and when you take the top of the pot off, all the shearings of wool that were on top of it fall off. The question is why those shearings of wool, why the top of the pot didn't become a basis to the shearings of wool. And here there are three answers in the Paiskim. One is if you look at the top of a pot, its function is to be the top of a pot, not to be the base of wool shearings. So therefore it doesn't become a basis because that's not really what its function is. Another answer is that a basis is only a basis when you put something on top of something else because you're putting it on top of it. Here, when you put the wool shearings, you weren't putting it on top of the pot, you were insulating a pot. When you were insulating a pot, some of them ended up being on top. But to be a basis, it really has to be when you're putting A on top of B. And not when you're doing a different activity, not putting one on top of the other, but just insulating the whole thing. And the third answer is that something only becomes a basis when you intend it to be lying on top of the basis all of Shabbos. But here you are planning on taking the top of the pot off on Shabbos, so therefore the top of the pot never became a basis to the wool. Now, to understand the Mishnah, they used to take a pot and put it inside a box or basket, and around the pot they put the insulating material, which is not Meisav Hevel. Now the issue, so Reb Elazar ben Azariah says when you want to take food out of the pot on Shabbos, so kupa mata al tzida v'naitel, you tip the box on the side, and therefore when you take the pot off, when you take the lid off, you're able to spill some of the food out onto a bowl or a tureen, and then you put the box straight back up, and your pot is still insulated for the next meal. Because the reason why you don't want to take the pot out is because if you take the pot out and then you're going to want to put it back in the insulating material, you won't be able to because when you take the pot out, so there's a cavity where the pot was, but all the wool will fall into the cavity. So now you're going to have to move all the wool aside in order to make that hole again to put the pot in, and the wool is muktzah. The Chacham say you're allowed to take the pot out and you'll put the pot back, and we'll see in the Gemara why the Chachamim are matir. Yosef Reb Yonasan ben Achinoy, Reb Yonasan ben Elazar, Yosef Reb Chanina bar Chama Gabayu. These three Amiroim were sitting together. The Kamiboilu, they were wondering, Shalochan shel Balabayis Tanan, Avo shel Uman Kivin the Kapar Alayu Loy Metal Talinanu. When we said that hides are not muktzah, are you talking about the hides of a private homeowner? Because he wouldn't mind if they gets a little stained, it's his private stuff. But the hides that belong to a leather worker, since he would be careful that it shouldn't get stained, it's muktzah Shabbos. Oidilma perhaps shall umantanan, maybe even a leather worker's hides are not muktzah. The kolshken shall balabais. So certainly a private homeowner's hides for sure would not be muktzah because you can sit on them. Omerlu Rabbi Yonason says, Mistavra, it's logical, I think, shall balabais tanan, a private homeowner's hides are not muktzah. You'll sit on it, he'll use it as a mat on the table. Alva shaluman, but a professional leather worker, kapet alai, would be careful with his hides not to get them stained, and therefore they should be muktzah. So Omerlu Rab Chama, Bar Chanina, Rab Chanina Bar Chama, so Rab Chanina Bar Chama said, Kacham Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yosi once said, Abba, his father Rabbi Yosi, Shaloch Ahava, was a leather worker, and Va'amar, he used to say during the week, Heviu Shlochin V'nei Shavalein, bring me my hides and let's sit down. So a leather worker like Rabbi Yosi would take his hides that he needs for his professional work and he would sit on them. Nothing's going to happen. So you see, there's two views. One view is that a leather worker would be makbet on his hides, and they're muktzah. Rav Chanina Bar Chama quoted Rav Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yosi that even a leather worker would not be makbet. I'm going to stop here, and I'll continue in part 2 soon.